So Zach, how are you?
I'm holding up, doing all right.
It's very good to hear. Now, it's a very interesting album that you've made, and I'd like to start with, well, we kind of touched upon it just before I turned the camera on, but you found kind of a home in northern Norway. How did you land on that spot?
There's not necessarily a good story for that, but it had a lot of things that I was looking for at the time. And I could try and explain them because it's kind of, you have to know a little bit my backstory, I guess. But essentially, to keep that story very short, I just saw pictures. I saw pictures of, I think it was Lofoten first, which is the more famous part. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's where I want to be. And I learned that Lofoten, it has a tourism problem. It's an issue. Okay. I was there in February, for example, and it was really, it could be very crowded in the more famous spots, and it felt hectic. I'm glad I didn't go there because as beautiful as it is, I think it would have felt very impersonal and kind of trapped in a crowd or something like that. So I just looked a little north of there, and then I saw a place with a pump organ, and so it became really obvious. Oh, that would be a great place to record. I mean, imagine those views and having an organ, and so that was the easy way. But as far as what I was looking for, just in general, there were two things. I'm really a winter person. Winter is my favorite, and I hate summer often. I can't stand it, and it's just heat to me is oppressive and constrictive and claustrophobic and all these things. And a lot of people say, oh, well, aren't you from the desert? Yeah, but Santa Fe is so high up in the mountains that when I first moved to New York, my red blood cell count was that of like a Himalayan Sherpa or something like that, you know? And yeah, I think I looked it up in meters. It's like over 2,000 meters because it's 7,000 feet in Santa Fe. It's higher than Denver by a fair amount, actually, by like 1,000 feet or something like that. So it's not that hot. I mean, it gets hot in the summer, but it's a dry heat, so you can always escape the heat just by getting in the shade, that sort of thing. Who knows, maybe that's changing now. I haven't been back in a long time, unfortunately. So I hate heat, and I love winter, and Berlin winters in the last 5 years have just been gray and rain, nothing more. I miss the snow because it snowed a lot where I'm from. So I grew up snowboarding, playing in the snow. You know, snow days were the best days of everything. So yeah, so I was looking for these extremes in that way and for the beauty of a place because I've really started to kind of, the city has started to become an almost like friction point in my life. Where as the older I get, I find the less energy I have to fight the kind of overstimuli of big cities, unfortunately, and I find it so exhausting and draining to be around public transport and things like that. And I think I liked it more as a younger guy, but I do think it took its toll on me mentally, actually. Sure. I think it really drained me. And then, yeah, my other plan was to go there during the polar night because I'm also very much like a nighttime person, which has its own longer backstory too. But yeah.
Oh, but that's the interesting part, I think, because it almost sounds like, and especially the time of year that you went and then kind of ending up in that whole lockdown period, where it almost sounds like a darkness retreat in some
yeah,
ways.
A darkness retreat. I like that. I haven't heard that, but I feel like, because, you know, people go to, what are they called, like quiet retreats and stuff like that. This was a darkness retreat. Daytime to me throughout my whole life, and this is not healthy, but it has started to represent bureaucracy, frustration, stress, dealing with the hard things in life. It represents crowds. It represents noise in kind of uncontrolled ways. It represents me feeling completely separate from the flow of life. I don't know why, but that's how it worked out. I mean, I have my theories anyway. And nighttime has come to represent when everything settles. and you can kind of breathe and you can think, and some of the kind of the stimuli is turned off, and I've always been a lot calmer as a person. So me going up there during that time, I very seriously was looking to turn off all the noise and have a quiet retreat. So that's why I like that phrase now that I've heard it.
Was it because you did go by yourself, I think, and it was very much a solitary creative process. Was that something that you were needing at that time? Because because you had that difficult moment with your throat in 2019, right before, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, the throat was the physical reason, but there were just a million mental reasons behind that. And I do think that the reason I was sick so often in 2019 was it was my body telling me, and the only way that I would listen, you know, my voice is the only thing that my body can physically, you know, it's like pulling levers looking for a way for me to listen. And it's like, well, if I turn off the voice, everything else stops. So I do think I was getting sick because I was just mentally beat up and exhausted. So I was going there to escape all that. I kind of forgot the question, unfortunately, but because I was thinking about that.
No, but because you arrived there and you have these well, the year that happened before, the issues with your throat, and then you go there by yourself, and it's kind of like a clean slate almost. You can kind of wipe the table off and started fresh, it feels like. Yeah,
you know, another thing was I had just canceling the tours. It was like I had let down thousands of fans. I had sent my band home empty-handed, no money, no future prospects, because I told them I don't know if I can tour ever again, and so this might be it, you know. And so I really didn't want to drag anyone else with me anymore, just creatively or literally. I didn't want to get someone caught in my kind of, because there was so much I still had to figure out, you know, what's going on with me? Why am I like this? Why do I keep kind of falling apart and that kind of thing? Yeah, so I went there to be alone. I wasn't completely alone, actually. My partner was there with me, and she was the one who had originally told me about the place, actually. And she speaks fluent Swedish, and she's one of the reasons I got into the places I got into up there, because she was able to kind of communicate with these people, and she's a lot more social than I am, so she was making them cookies and cake and inviting people over and stuff. It was really helped actually a lot. So
one last question about kind of the solitary nature of that trip then, because you mentioned a couple of those existential kind of questions, and I wrote some of them show up on the album. I wrote them down, but when you have those questions kind of floating around in your head, and then all of a sudden you're by yourself with no distractions, they might amplify those thoughts. So how did you kind of figure those out?
They do amplify. Well,
sorry, let me rephrase it slightly. How did you find a way to get rid of those thoughts or use those thoughts in the music?
I mean, the easiest way to explain is the music is what I've always done to deal with exactly those problems. My family has potentially a strong genetic predisposition towards neuroticism, depression, all these awful things. And at the time I was really looking into a lot of psychological things, you know, like kind of trauma and all this stuff. And you know, what's funny is I used to really, really believe that was everything. And now I've actually come more to the conclusion that it's a good 50-50 split of what you're born with and what you went through.
Sure.
So you don't, you know, the funny thing is I don't have any good narrative with this record where it's like, I had a rough year, I had a dark night of the soul, I went up there, I discovered something, I had an epiphany, and then I just returned home healed and better, because that's what I expected. That was my stupid, magical thinking, American kind of utopian idea of how it was going to turn out, if I'm being honest, you know. But that's not what happened at all. What I found was that there were more issues I had internally than I thought, and I had been just hiding them all under the rug since I was probably a young teenager. And these were issues that the only thing that changed, and in a good way, was that I became more aware of them. And I think, I mean, here's one lesson people learn from trauma and healing, for example, is it's not that you suddenly lose the trauma or get over it or solve it, but rather that you just get better at kind of carrying it with you. And that's, you know, that's what happened. So it's really, I returned to Berlin very humbled, because I went, my whole life I've been running on this idea that, yeah, I could control everything, that everything that was wrong was somehow the outside world's fault, even at times. And now I've developed a much more natural, realistic view of, like, you know, it can be external, but it's often internal, and you are responsible for your own issues. And also that life is not meant to be like, you know, like they advertise in the antidepressant ads in the US, for example.
And then on Instagram, how life is portrayed.
Yeah.
No, and like you said, I think that's an important realization, that things just don't change overnight. It's a continual process.
They continue, yeah. I've gotten a lot of interviews with this record that kind of say, like, now that that's over, you know what I mean?
I wish I was, yeah.
Yeah, what do you mean now that it's over?
No, but let's get into kind of the musical process then there, because when did you meet Oddvar, and when did you get access to the church?
Yeah, so Oddvar was first brought up because when I found this place that had the pump organ, I simply wrote the owners to ask if it was playable, if it was in tune, that sort of thing, and they said, yeah, not only that, but it was lended to us. They call it a permanent loan from Oddvar, because he collects these instruments and he repairs them, and I think he really grows attached to them in some ways. And so they said, yeah, he's a neighbor and a family friend, and he has a whole garage full of these organs. And on top of that, he plays at he's a backup church organist kind of. So if the main person wasn't available, then they would call him, and he could do what's the word? He could fill in anyway.
Yeah, we didn't have church here in the Netherlands, so or at least I didn't.
I kind of grew up on the atheist side of things, but there's a whole story to that too. Yeah, so I was really, as soon as I heard that, I was really eager to meet this guy, because you know, pump organs are they're disappearing faster than they're reappearing, that's for sure. So, and I've been a huge fan of them since I was so young, and so I knew I really wanted to meet this guy, and we got up there and we were introduced, and very early on he let me into the church to record at the church organ. And after that we actually got closer, and now I would say that, yeah, his family and the owners of the cabin where I was staying are probably the two closest groups of people I know up there. So yeah, I mean, they're amazing, you know. It's like every time Oddvar would come over, he would bring fish cakes and to keep us fed and that kind of stuff. And there were some times where I got stuck at the church because of snow, and he was like, just call me, even if it's midnight, I'll come with the tractor and we'll dig you out, you know.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, very sweet.
Recording a pump organ, I'm not a recording specialist, but what goes into that? Because you can't just put a mic to it, or can you?
You can. I mean, that's all you can do, actually. You know what's funny is, as an engineer, I feel like I've gotten better. I feel like this album might be the last one where I'm just really sloppy. Because by the end of the process, I feel like I really started to know what works. And a lot of times I feel like people overcomplicate these things. No, I do that. The problem with just putting a few mics up in front of the pump organ is that you better have some WD-40 with you, because the pumps can be really squeaky, and you have to watch out for that. But you have to remember that with all these acoustic instruments, that's part of the charm too, is leaving the artifacts of the instrument in there, and that's what we're missing in the digital world anyway. So it's kind of a blessing and a curse, of course. Yeah.
And tackling the pump organ, because on your previous album, Gallipoli, you played a Farfisa organ.
Yeah.
Is there a big difference, or is there overlap?
Yeah, well, I mean, so the Farfisas were they were the early electronic organs. They're like tone wheel technology, which is, imagine it's funny because they invented this technology long before synthesizers, as far as I know. And it has to do, imagine like a guitar pickup and a metal wheel with gear heads on it. And this wheel spins in front of the pickup, and the electric kind of interplay of the two create a tone. And then you can shape that tone in a million different ways. And so that's the Farfisa, but it has a very analog feeling to it. So it feels acoustic to me, even though you have to turn it on before you hear any sound. And of course, the pump organ is literally just, I mean, it's like riding a bicycle to get it going.
Kind of all four limbs.
Yeah, you're working all four limbs, and the instrument is breathing. And so for me, the beauty of it is really that it's a really enveloping experience. It feels like it's just this extremely warm, rich instrument that kind of...
Sure.
But yeah, I obviously I'm very obsessed with organs, and I was from a young age. And it even got to the point when I was a teenager that people were bringing broken old organs to my house because they were like, "Oh, you're the guy that likes to do this stuff."
So you were the local Oddvar.
Yeah, I was the local Oddvar. Me and Oddvar are funny too because there's a lot of other similarities that are we're both space cadets and very, very forgetful and very distractible, I guess. Potentially both obsessive about things. Yeah.
Do you need that kind of, because you mentioned that obsessive quality earlier, is that a benefit as a musician, especially as you mentioned, kind of locking yourself away and just tinkering away?
Yeah, I wouldn't make music if I wasn't obsessive. I mean, the reason addiction and creativity often go together is because addiction is a type of obsession, and you have to obsess about what you're doing. It's so funny because you see a lot of bands that start, and it's so clear that the people in it, they just wanted to dress up and get on stage, you know? And that is always the weirdest thing in the world to me, because it's like, I couldn't have not done music even if I tried, you know? It's like, it called me, and I couldn't not do it. It's just impossible not to, because it is, it's like an obsessive compulsive disorder type of situation. I did so much recording when I was a teenager that I had to drop out of high school. I lost most of my friends because I never saw them. I never went to, you know, parties. I never knew what was going on. People romanticize being a musician in some ways, but if you actually see the reality of it, you would see that of a very helpless individual caught in an obsession almost. And it's not a bad thing. I think it's kind of neat and interesting, and I'd rather live like this than any other way, but it's still, it borders on extremely unhealthy behavior. That's the truth of it, you know?
And I mean, I think a good example is that is the touring schedule, and you've dealt with exhaustion, and I hear that from a lot of people. And
but that is not something I was obsessed about. I have friends in bands that are obsessed with the road. COVID came and they were crawling out of their skin, waiting to get back on stage, but get back on the road. That was the opposite of me. I, from a super young age, when I was making music as a teenager, I remember thinking, there's nothing else in the world I want to do other than just write songs in the studio. How the hell am I going to survive the road? Because I knew even then that I wasn't made for it. And 17 years of touring only proved that point even more. I don't think I've ever made it through a tour without ending up hospitalized or at best at home on the couch, drinking myself into a hole for like months or something like that I never crawl out of. Because there's something about it that kills me. And yeah, I mean, for most people it would make sense that there's a lot of pressure for concerts and all the traveling is exhausting on the body and mind, but there's something even more to it than that. And I don't know what it is, but ever since the first tour, which ended in me as a 19-year-old, I was 20 by then. Back home in New Mexico, just in the psychiatrist's office because I was having like a psychotic break from reality. I didn't know who I was, where I was. I didn't know what existence was. So every morning I'd wake up and it was kind of like breathing was like the new experience of having a body every single day and existing and not being in a cold black, neither worlds that didn't exist. And it's because my mind broke trying to cope with whatever it is on tour. So yeah, it's funny because it's like I travel somewhat, but people always assume that I'm just like with my backpack traveling the world all the time. No, I can't do that. I would die. I would mentally just zap out and cease to exist. No, I tend to do what I did in Hadsel, which is I pick a place, I go there and I stay there for like 2 or 3 months, and then I come back, and then like 2-3 years later I go somewhere else.
Talking about the kind of the plight of the artist, if we can call it that. But what I always find interesting is that any creative pursuit, if you're going to share it, it's inherently kind of, there's doubt attached to it, and there's uncertainty. Yeah. How have you kind of navigated that throughout your career, and where are you now with it?
I haven't navigated it smoothly by any means. That's one of those things where it's like there's no solution, right? There's no happy ending. It's like you just keep navigating. You just keep trying. Because the first record I did, I didn't really think anyone was going to specifically hear it, except for my brothers, who I shared everything with, But I love that about that record because it's really vulnerable in that way. It's really true. That's what I like most about it, is it's just very genuine. It's very quick to, express itself. But I do feel like probably around like the Riptide, for example, and then No. By those albums, I was already dying of self-awareness. I was really falling apart because I knew everything I touched would be analyzed and taken apart by others. And that's really hard to do. It's hard to sit at a piano and feel free when you know it's going to be taken. Good, bad, this, that, whatever. Who does this guy think he is? Whatever the result is. And that really, really crippled me. And I lived in so much fear and pain for those like 8 years, because it was like 4 years between records at that point. And that was partially because I couldn't write, because I was just crippled by that. Yeah. So, but I do think I've come out the other side of that, actually, in a lot of ways. And who knows, maybe it'll come back and I'll just keep doing that dance, so to speak.
But if we go back to Hadsel, then if you think back of the creative, of the writing process, was it arduous, or did the environment kind of help you?
Yeah. Here's what the whole new environment for recording thing is about, actually, because the new environment cracks down some of that self-consciousness, self-awareness. And instead of thinking about yourself all the damn time, you're focused on the outside world around you, and the kind of the new environment, the scenery, all these things. And with Hadsel, I got really lucky because it's so ridiculously beautiful there. I mean, just unbelievable, that I became like a kid again, just every time I got there in the deep night, the polar night, and then as the days were starting to reappear, you get these little brief windows of time where you can look out, and it's just what you see is like nothing you've ever seen or experienced in your life. Just so incredible. And then that state of just being like a child, it broke down all the bullshit. It broke down all the kind of hardens, I know who I am, I know what the world's like, whatever. And so that really, that's why I feel like this album in a lot of ways was so influenced by the environment, in that simple way of just being able to express genuine, unfiltered appreciation and awe. And I think that in the music, I was very unself-conscious and very experimental in my way, And that was the benefit, and that's how it came out. I'm really happy about that. Because it did feel like I was finally releasing that burden that I had for, like Riptide, No, and Gallipoli, where I was just very aware the whole time, this is going to be analyzed, taken apart. So, yeah.
That's great then, that this felt a lot more liberating in a sense.
Yeah. So because of that, the writing was extremely fast. I mean, in 2 months, I had most of the material for the album.
And then did you, because I read something, and now this is from memory, so I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but that you were looking for a double bass and then thought, well, I might as well do everything myself.
Yeah.
Did you ever end up learning how to play a double bass?
Well, funny enough, our friends in Norway have a double bass because Oddvar's daughter had picked it up later to play. So I realized that I can do very, very simple things on it. It's not something I don't know if I would record myself doing it though, but it was fun.
Seems like a fun instrument.
Yeah, it's really fun.
And one last question I have about kind of recording things. There's I can't remember which song it was.
You could probably describe it.
I'm not sure, but there's parts where you harmonize vocals.
Yeah.
Now, I remember I used to be I'm still a big Ray Charles fan, and there's this story about this song, I believe, To My Soul, where he kind of does the falsetto harmonies himself. He just threw his band out and I'll do it myself. What was it like for you to kind of use your voice in those ways and kind of figuring out how to layer them? And
that's been a weird thing my whole life because I don't have any musical theory background or anything. I mean, I learned some when I was learning trumpet, but in general, it's not. But with the voice, it's like music theory doesn't even matter because you can't really control it like an instrument. You know that this is the correct place to put your finger for a piano chord to appear and so on. With voice, it's like you really just have to go for it and hope for the best. And that's actually one of my favorite things in the world to do is harmonies, because I think if you do learn too much music theory, you get stuck, actually. And for me, doing harmonies has always been about sing one part without any thought at all about what comes next, and then mute that part and sing another thing that to you sounds just as interesting or like a new idea rather than a reference to the other part, rather just like this new idea that also sounds interesting. And then later you unmute the two parts and you go, that worked, or it doesn't. Sometimes it fails horribly, of course. But that to me is the way of doing it, is this kind of like competing ideas at the same time. Do they end up benefiting each other or taking away? And I've always done it that way. And I do think because of that, I've come up with some interesting ones that maybe most people wouldn't have. I don't know, but
is it a similar process then to kind of balance the analog synths that you used and the pump organ? Because those are both such rich sounds.
They are. In fact, the problem with a lot of the record was it was getting very muddy. And that was mixing this record was one of the hardest things I've ever done, and the longest mixing process I've ever done. I was done with the record in a year. It took me a whole year to mix it, and I did some of it myself. And I did some of it with Craig Silvey in the UK. And it was not easy because, yes, they compete for space in some places. So, But I love that instrument combo. I love putting these combos that just kind of don't make any sense. And you would think would come out like super novel or something, but I wouldn't use it if it just sounded like a novelty. I always want it to feel meaningful and organic in the end. But I do like to put together ridiculous combinations. So I thought it was so absurd in some ways to do like modular synth, bass and percussion, and a church organ or a pump organ, and then on top of that a baritone ukulele. I just thought, I haven't exactly seen a band like that before. So
no, definitely I haven't seen one. And then as you mentioned, kind of the drum pad, that I think it's a drum pad that you use, kind of, or
well, I actually programmed. I sequenced the drums using analog trigger stuff with the modular synths.
Yeah, and that combination, as you mentioned, is very interesting. The different textures that you get from it.
Yeah, it's fun. Yeah.
There's one specific song that I was, at least musically, that I find interesting because of the name Baion.
Baion, yeah.
I googled it. It's from what I could find, a Brazilian genre of music with a certain two-tone rhythm or something.
1-2-1-2, basically, I think. Yeah.
How did this find its way into? Because you're in Norway, and then all of a sudden this Brazilian influence comes in.
Well, that one came That was one of the ones that came later, back in Berlin.
Okay.
But that doesn't exactly explain Brazil, of course. No, I collect these old analog drum machines from the 70s. And because I'm not the best drummer, but also because I'm looking for new sounds, I don't like every song being like a drum kit in general. And on this record, I was doing the analog synth drums, and then I was using these old drum machines. And so that's just the setting on the drum machine, Baion.
Okay.
But the thing is, when I buy these drum machines, I always buy them for the Latin settings, because one of the best things about, quote, Latin music, which is covering so much territory, it's weird to put it under one term even, but they are the most creative with percussion. They're so, like, if you listen to, Cuban music and a lot of South American music, it's like, weirdly, a lot of places around the world hardened around 2 or 3 instruments or 2 or 3 drums, for example. It's like, okay, in the West, we have the trap kit, as we call it, so on. But there, it's like the world was so wide open with sounds. So my favorite, and the other thing is they're so experimental with rhythms, too. It's never just like, you don't get these very predictable ones. So yeah, it's really, when I go to the drum machines, I go to the Latin section. It's incredible.
I didn't realize that, but now that you say that, it does make sense. Yeah, that the rhythm. One last question then, because you kind of mentioned, touring might be out of the question in the future. Yeah. Were you hesitant at all? Because you go through a period where your voice isn't doing what you want it to do. Yeah. Once you have to start recording your vocals, then was that an anxious thing? Were you hesitant in a way?
It was terrifying. This is something I've struggled with ever since music became my profession. Is I walk around thinking about my damn throat all day. It's just obsessive, like and that's the me on tour is just walking around. I can't talk too much. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I was very scared because I had brought my voice very close to like a permanent injury in 2019. Okay. Because what happens was I was singing on steroids because I was sick the whole time. I was sick for 5 weeks in the US. I was sick for 2 weeks on the first European tour. I was sick for another 2 weeks on the second European tour. And that was when I canceled because the doctor, he said, yeah, this is not looking good. They checked because I got sick yet again. And they said you could take steroids and antibiotics again and finish the tour potentially. But yeah, you risk losing your voice or damaging it permanently. And so I'm paranoid with this stuff. It drives me nuts. It keeps me up at night. And but a good thing happened, which was, I think, because I was really allowing myself to just do whatever felt natural and not force anything. I did get back to a point when I was doing this record that I became more playful and more relaxed with the voice again. But with me, as with everything, it comes and goes, and I have phases where, again, I feel I'll wake up one day and it'll just feel the slightest bit different or tense, and all of a sudden I go to the studio and I'm like, I've lost it. I've lost my voice forever. I'll never sing again. Oh, it's terrible. Oh my God. And then, my girlfriend or someone will be like,
she kind of has to pick you up. And
it's all in your head. Yeah. But, I was putting it at risk back then, but most of the time it's just paranoia. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that, like we mentioned in the beginning, it's not like it's fixed, but I'm glad that you have those moments of clarity. And
I'm aware now. That's what happened. That's what's changed. Because of the alone time, because of the focus on these things, I have a much better ability to comfort myself and say something along the lines of, these are cycles and these are waves. So, yeah. Yeah,
you figured out a way, despite all that, to make another record. So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
Amazing. Yeah. Zach, may I thank you so much for taking the time.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you so much.